How did natives survive on water from desert plants? In this video, you'll learn the historical indigenous methods used to obtain water from desert plants. This is all based on references cited below, found in my 13 years of researching historical American Indian ethnobotany as a biologist and a native of the Southwest. These aren't your hacky survival tricks. These are real techniques used by real people in desperate situations. But as most of these are highly destructive to plants, some of which can take many years to grow to full size, I'm not going to be demonstrating these techniques, but I will describe them in detail. All of these plants occur in the desert Southwest, and most of them are cacti, but not all cacti can be used this way, as there are plenty that are toxic. So let's start with the main one that's not a cactus, which is agave. I apologize for the dogs barking. There's not a lot of wild agaves in my area, but here's one. There's a dog in a yard right over there. It's likely the case that all agave can be used in this manner, but this technique comes from the Seri of Baja California, who used agave cerulata. Agave in general are edible after cooking and contain a watery, succulent tissue in their thick leaves. The heart, or the part where all the leaf bases intersect, was the main part eaten, but for water, the leaves were used. So the spined leaf tips and the margins were trimmed off the leaves. The leaves were then roasted over a fire until the outside was charred. This charring was scraped off and the inner part was pounded to release a sweet juice that was drunk as an emergency water source. So don't try this with raw agave, as the raw juices are caustic and toxic. I've cooked agave leaves in earth ovens and regular ovens, and they're indeed very juicy and nicely sweet. Now the rest are cacti, except one shrub worth mentioning in this vein at the end. So various cacti species were used for obtaining emergency drinking water, including prickly pear, cholla, hedgehog cactus, and most of all, barrel cactus of several species. So first, prickly pear is the easiest to identify of these. It has these distinct flattened stem segments or pads. And the plains prickly pear, or Opuntia polyacantha, was used by the Cheyenne war parties as an emergency water source. And the exact method was unfortunately not detailed, but we can reasonably suppose that the stems were crushed, cooked, and their juices strained out, similar to how the Seri used agave, or maybe cooked and crushed first and then strained out. But it's possible that the pads weren't cooked at all. Raw prickly pear stems are safe to eat, but cooking would soften them, making them more palatable and easier to crush up. So the other main use of prickly pear for drinking water is not a direct water extraction, and was more of an early settler and Mexican folk technique. But a similar technique was used by the Seri, who used jumping cholla instead. So these two genera, prickly pear and cholla, are closely related and are both usable in basically the same way. So in this technique, the stems of either genus were cut up into strips, usually after grilling them or removing the spines, and throwing them in a fire would accomplish both expediently. So these strips were thrown into muddy or silty water to cause the sediment to precipitate and settle at the bottom of a body of water in order that it could be used for drinking. So the mucilaginous character of the stem flesh was likely responsible for the binding of the suspended sediments to clear the water. So this method is not going to filter bacteria, viruses, or protozoans, so it would still need to be sterilized by boiling or something in most situations. But it is a helpful first step in filtration, and was also used simply to clear water for washing clothes or the like. So Echinocereus, and this is Echinocereus reisenbachii, or lace hedgehog cactus. Echinocereus is a genus of hedgehog cactus, of which there are many, including many with edible fruits, which is also true of prickly pear and cholla. But one species in particular, Echinocereus trichlochiatianus, or king cactus, was used as an emergency water source by the Isleta Pueblo. So the stems were crushed and the juices were extracted for drinking. And it may be the case that other hedgehog cactuses have similarly usable flesh, but they could also have toxic properties, so beware. Now, this final category of cactus is probably the one you've heard about, if you've heard anything about using cacti for drinking water. These are the barrel cactus, but it's not as straightforward as you might imagine. So some of these are actually mildly poisonous and must be used with caution. They're also all large cacti that take a long time to grow, so please don't go out and try this. These techniques are to know only in use of emergency, if it's a real emergency. And even then, there's probably better choices of how to get hydrated. Barrel cactus, or biznaga, is the genus Pharaoh cactus. And 4 species in this genus were known to have historically been used for emergency drinking water by various indigenous peoples of the Southwest, including the Apache, Cahuilla, Seri, and Tana-O'odham. These species are Phaerocactus cylindraceus, or California barrel cactus, Phaerocactus emerii, Emery's barrel cactus, Phaerocactus hematocanthus, or the Texas barrel cactus, and Phaerocactus wislizenii, or candy barrel cactus. And this last one, wislizenii, was probably the most used, and as the name indicates, candy barrel cactus, the flesh was also used to make a kind of candy. So all species in the genus are succulent, globular, and columnar, and this species grows up to 10 feet tall. So the Seri method to obtain water from the species was to extract the stem's juices. So this was drunk on a full stomach, and physical activity was avoided for a while after drinking it to avoid any ill effects and diarrhea. So it's mildly toxic. So kindling was placed around the cactus and was burned to remove the spines first, and then the plant was uprooted or cut off at the ground and cut open. Then the pulp was scraped out or mashed with sticks and then squeezed into a container to drink it. Now the Tana-O'odham simply cut off the top of the cactus, pounded the pulp directly within it, and then scooped out the juice with a gourd. That's Latinarius cicerea, a gourd cup. So this might be done on a long journey, and water was also obtained by the Tana-O'odham by using the upper 8 inches of the stem, and it was said to have tasted very slightly salty and somewhat herbaceous. Now the more globular forms furnished more palatable water than the older columnar forms. The Tana-O'odham also avoided strenuous activity following the drinking of this water to prevent any negative effects. Travelers through the desert used the stems as a combination cooking vessel and water source. So an individual measuring about 2 feet in diameter was cut horizontally and hollowed out. And this hollow was filled with the plant's juicy pulp, as well as any meat, fruit, or other food on hand. And water was added if available, and stones were heated, dropped inside, and used to cook the dish, being removed and reheated as necessary. And this was actually a favorite dish of the Yavapai and Apache in Arizona. Other barrel cactus species were used similarly. So the California barrel cactus stems are full of water that was used by the Cahuilla for drinking. The top was sliced off, a portion of the pulp was removed to create a depression, and the pulp was squeezed by hand in the depression to fill it with water. So the inner flesh was also eaten or sucked directly to quench one's thirst. Now, Emery's barrel cactus, their stems were also used by the Tana-O'odham for drinking water, following the exact method described for the candy barrel cactus. However, for the stems of this species, they were considered by the Seri to be too poisonous to use for water. So they all appear to have some mild toxicity, some more than others, and it also depends on age. Now finally, the Texas barrel cactus stems were used by the Apache for an emergency drinking water. The top of the barrel cactus was cut off, and then the pulp was squeezed for water. A reed was used as a straw to suck out the liquid, and such a reed was required to be carried by all novice Apache hunters. The various methods are pretty similar, just extract the pulp, squeeze it, and then strain it. Now, for the third time, don't try these unless you truly are in a desperate situation. These cacti grow very slowly and will serve you much better alive with their edible sweet fruits. Plus, the flesh will make you at least a little bit ill. Now, the final mention here is the shrub, Forestiera pubescens, elbowbush or stretchberry. Often has this 90-degree branching like this. So it wasn't directly used for water, but it served as an indicator to the Isleta Pueblo of a good spot to dig a well, as they considered anywhere they grow to produce water when a well was dug. And that's it. So remember to pack plenty of water when you're out in the desert. Make a reasonable plan and be safe out there. So if you appreciate this kind of knowledge, you're gonna love my book, Native Food Plants of Texas, all based on historical indigenous practices. So links to the paper book and ebook are in the description. Thanks for watching, y'all. Take it easy.